Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei was the hidden dragon leader? Part 7. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. As she sat on her family's train with her peerage by her side, Ria's Gremory should have been extraordinarily happy. After a long year she was returning to the underworld, and now she no longer had the burden of her marriage to Riser to worry about. Unfortunately for her, Rias was thinking about something entirely different, and it was noticed by Azazel, who had become the orc's advisor and Kuoh's latest teacher after the events at the conference. Something on your mind, Rias? You should be a lot happier considering the circumstances. Azazel said calmly. He had an idea of what was bothering her, but he didn't want to assume. I'm fine. I guess I'm just wondering how Issei is doing. Rias said calmly, something one of her servants was not pleased by. Lady Rias, you need to stop this foolishness right now. Carloman spoke up, interrupting the group. Excuse me, Rias exclaimed. You're caught up in the Red Dragon Emperor because of what he did for you with Lord Riser, but he's shown that he doesn't care for you at all. Focus on making us stronger instead of fighting a losing battle, or you will regret it. Carloman said coldly. You've got a lot of nerve saying that. At least Issei does sexual things with you for legitimate reasons. Meanwhile, he won't touch me unless it's to manipulate me. Rias said bitterly. Lady Rias, have you forgotten that he made the two exorcists part dragon to prevent you from getting a hold of them? That alone should tell you how he feels. The fact you pine over somebody who clearly dislikes you makes you as bad as Lord Riser was with you. Carloman said with her own bitter feelings. Enough. Azazel yelled, stopping the subject. But Rias said angrily. Right now, you are Ria's Gremory heiress to the Gremory clan and a high-class devil. Very soon you'll be returning home to introduce your family to your new peerage members and preparing for the youth devil meetings that I mentioned to you. This is not the time to worry about Issei, especially when he's in the human world doing whatever he is doing. Azazel lectured brutally. Both Valerie and Rias were so focused on Issei that they were making life far too difficult for themselves. If he didn't have to deal with it himself, he would find it hilarious, but sadly he did, and that meant he had to put his foot down. Right, Rias said bitterly at the cruel scolding. This was a crucial summer for her, particularly since she was without a pawn and she would be meeting with the other young devils soon. She had to stay focused or she could find herself in deep trouble. How is everything going in Kuoh, Rias? Ria's mother Venelana asked as her family gathered together for dinner in the massive Gremory family dining room. Venelana Gremory was an older version of Rias, but instead of crimson red hair her hair was flaxen and she had violet eyes. Her current outfit was a white low-cut dress with black trim that went just above her knees, showed off her absolutely mammoth breasts, and she was seated next to her husband Ziodicus Gremory, a man with crimson hair like Ria's that framed his face, blue eyes, and a small bit of red facial hair. He was wearing a white military uniform with a black mantle over it. The Gremory peerage was dressed in their Kuoh uniforms as they sat down. It's going well. Things could be worse, but they could always be better. Rias said reluctantly. I see. By the way, I'm surprised the Red Dragon Emperor isn't joining us. Ziodicus said with a smile. Issei is otherwise occupied. Rias said bitterly. Considering what happened with Riser, I thought for sure you two were an item. Venelana wondered. There was a hint of disapproval in her voice, and Rias knew it, but there was nothing she could do. Issei and I are amicable, but that's it. Rias admitted with a slight blush. That's a shame. Regardless, I would like a chance to meet him if that's possible. Ziodicus hoped. I'll do my best, Rias said solemnly. Considering what happened with Riser, Rias knew that Issei was her next best hope before she was inevitably chained to somebody else, and she hated that idea. Of course. Venelana replied as the dinner continued without any more interruptions. The first few days went by quickly for Rias, and while she was okay with that, she hoped to at least hear about Issei in some regards. To that end, she made her way over to Azazel's room to talk, but she was surprised to see the door open and a familiar face walk out. Valerie, what are you doing here? Rias wondered. I had some business with Zaz, Valerie said nonchalantly. Alright, Rias replied, deciding not to question anything else. Walking into the room, she noticed a sour expression on the normally jovial face of the fallen angel leader. That look faded when he realized she was in front of him, something Rias took immediate notice of. Hello there, Rias, how is everything? Azazel said calmly. Fine, I was just wondering if you've heard from Issei. Rias questioned. Azazel had the nerve to look bashful before smiling. I haven't, but I do think it's time to get down to business. Get your peerage and let's get some training down, Azazel said calmly. Rias knew he was hiding something, but since she wasn't willing to call him out, she just shrugged. Alright. It took Rias a little over an hour to gather everyone and get them dressed in the schoolyard. Everyone was wearing the white shirt and blue bloomers of the Kuoh uniform, with a smiling Azazel wearing a grey tracksuit with a white shirt underneath. I figured it's time you guys got some training done, and in order to help things along I've called in some backup. Azazel smiled. Rias hoped somehow that Issei was involved, but when a familiar magic circle appeared, she realized that Valerie's business was to help her. The Lucifer heiress was joined by most of her peerage, and the obvious exception being Kuroka. Unlike the Grimoire group, Valerie's group was dressed in their standard outfits. "Yo Rias, are you ready to train?" Valerie said calmly. "I guess so." Rias frowned, wondering who the people with Valerie were. Relax, Red. Valerie may not be the dragon you wanted to see, but she is the dragon you need right now. Biku chuckled. "Really, Biku, did you have to go there?" LeFay pouted. "Anyway," Valerie huffed to get the group focused again, "this is my peerage of sorts. The blondes are Arthur and LeFay Pendragon, and the guy with the bad jokes is Biku." Valerie revealed. "A pleasure to meet you," Arthur said with a smile before taking a small bow. "Treat us well." LeFay said with a small courtesy. "What's up?" Biku smiled, ignoring the bad joke sentiment. "Hello there, it's a pleasure to meet some of Valerie's friends. This is Kaneko Tauju Asia Argento Gasper Vladiyumi Kiba and Akeno Himeji." Maria's replied with a professional smile before introducing her peerage. "What's up?" "Hi there." "Hello. Nice to meet all of you." "It's a pleasure." The Grimoire group replied respectfully. Now that everyone's met, the training will be as followed. Kaneko will be with Biku, since her rook traits will work really well with his battle style. Yumi and Carloman can train with Arthur. Trust me girls, he's powerful, so you can learn a few things. Asia and Gasper can train with LeFay. I understand you're not a battler, but you can learn some cool stuff from LeFay about healing, and Gasper can work on his powers also if he wants. Valerie explained. "Fufu, what about me?" Akeno teased as Valerie went through the ranks. "Akeno, you'll be training with me. We're going to work on that together," Azazel said sternly. It was time she awakened her fallen angel powers, and Azazel would see to that personally. Akeno's body trembled at the suggestion since she knew what he was after. "Never. I refuse to acknowledge that side of me," Akeno said angrily. "Then you're a fool," Biku said coldly. "Excuse me?" Akeno said angrily, not appreciating the harsh response. "If you think you're the only one who's got family issues, you're wrong. Arthur was the heir to arguably the most important family in England outside of the royal family, and he left all of that because his family wouldn't accept the women he loved. LeFay followed because her brother was the only person in said family who cared about her as a person also, and with him gone, there was no telling what they'd do. You guys know about Valerie's famous daddy issues, and the fact she's even acknowledging that name is a step in the right direction. As for me, I'm a descendant of the victorious fighting Buddha Son Goku, so that should tell you that I'm not where I need to be. You're blaming the wrong person for what happened to your mother, Akeno," Biku said coldly. "Be silent, Biku," Azazel yelled, interrupting the two of them and catching everyone off guard. Azazel was nonchalant about most things, but this was not one of them. "Sorry man, I was just making a point," Biku said bashfully. It was one of the rare times that Azazel ever got angry and everyone took notice. "I know that, but Akeno's issue is a very delicate matter," Azazel said with a look of clear regret in her face. "Valerie. You take care of Akeno and I'll work with Rias," Azazel instructed, the energy seemingly drained from his body. "Got it," Valerie replied. Even she wasn't going to argue with Azazel after that display. "Alright guys, get going." Rias frowned. The heavy start to the day wouldn't change anything, and she knew it. For now, she could focus on getting stronger and hope the rest took care of itself. Training with Valerie was brutal, and even though Akeno would admit she enjoyed pain, she didn't enjoy being at the mercy of the Lucifer heiress. It didn't help that she was also distracted from the earlier display. Azazel's outburst was a rare one from the man, and she couldn't help but wonder more. It was easy to forget sometimes because of how he acted, but he is the leader of the fallen angels, and that includes her estranged father. Making her way over to the bedroom, she hoped that she could figure out just why the normally calm man was so angry. Arriving at his door, Akeno knocked calmly. "May I come in, Azazel?" Akeno said nervously. "Of course you can, Akeno," Azazel said calmly, and the half-fallen opened the door and walked into the room. Azazel's room was a simple one with a decent-sized bed and a small desk that he could use for business and a comfortable chair for him to sit on. Azazel was sitting at the desk, but what drew Akeno's eyes was the wine bottle sitting on the table. It was an ornate gold bottle with a gold cap and various flowers along its body, with the words Eden stitched into the body in white lettering. "That can't be," Akeno said in disbelief, since she realized what a significant thing this simple bottle was. The Garden of Eden was the legendary home of Adam and Eve, and in the garden was everything that a person could ask for, including grapes for wine. According to Rias, the wine from the Garden of Eden's grapes is said to be the finest wine ever produced, but nobody knew how to get it, including her brother. "Yes, it is. This is one of the bottles of wine made from the original Garden of Eden's grapes. This bottle was given to me by God himself back when I was still one of his seraphs, which should tell you how ancient it is and how valuable it is to collectors and to me. Because of a special property of the grapes, the taste remains the same throughout the years, and I can even make more of it by putting water inside it. One could say this wine is made of God's power. Issei Hyoudou said in shock since that truly was a valuable bottle. I've personally opened my bottle a grand total of 4 times since I received it. The first was right after I withdrew from the war and it was done to celebrate my father's death. One of those times was the day that your father Barakiel got married to your mother. Azazel said solemnly. What? Hyoudou said in disbelief. Barakiel might have been my most powerful cadre, but Barakiel was my best friend. He was as loyal as they came, and I showed him my blessings by allowing him and your mother Shuri to drink from this bottle. Why are you telling me this? Hyoudou wondered. Because I want you to know that if you should blame anybody for your mother's death, it's not your father but me. Azazel said solemnly. That's a lie, Hyoudou said angrily, her anger returning. Unfortunately it isn't. Azazel frowned. Your mother's family is one of the most powerful clans in Japan, and the idea that one of them had a child with a fallen angel was blasphemy. To be completely honest, her family had been after your mother and you for years, but thanks to Barakiel constantly watching you they couldn't do anything. They feared him as much as they hated him, which said all that you needed to know about the man's power. So why? Why did he leave me? Hyoudou wondered, tears forming on her eyes. Because I asked him to. A mission came up that required his power, and I had no choice but to call him in despite the fact I had all but allowed him to leave to raise you. I already knew Shuri and I was going to take his place, but he left before I could arrive. By the time I did, it was too late. Azazel admitted, barely holding back tears of his own. What happened to my father? Hyoudou wondered. She could see the emotions in his eyes and knew he wasn't faking. When he learned what happened to you, your father was inconsolable. It got so bad that we had to start bringing him food or he would have starved himself to death. It was only when he learned you were alive that he left that room. The reason I'm here in Kuoh now is to watch over you the way I failed to do so back then. What? Hyoudou said in shock. Your father never stopped loving you, Hyoudou, and I hoped to eventually bring him to you, but when I realized just how deep your hatred ran, I gave up on that. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me for my failures, but I would ask that you not hold it against your father and find a way to embrace your fallen angel side once again. Hyoudou was silent at the admission since it was so jaw-dropping. I'll try, Hyoudou said with a bittersweet smile. She had a long way to go before accepting her father, but after hearing this story, she was willing to try. Haneko's room. Haneko Taoju was in a very awkward place as she curled onto her twin bed in frustration after the day of training. Biku was a brutal opponent, but it wasn't his fists that hurt so badly. It was the fact that he seemed to be going out of his way to use senjutsu on her during their training. It was almost as though he was taunting her because he knew what she really was. To make matters worse, there was the odd feeling she had in the back of her head that she was being watched the whole time. In fact, she still had it, and due to her frustration, she decided to act on it. Come on out already. You can't keep hiding forever. Kaneko said angrily, springing up from her spot on the bed and ready to attack. Well done, Shirin. Looks like there's hope for you yet. A voice purred to Kaneko's shock. It can't be, Kaneko said with her eyes wide open. Her thought was confirmed when none other than her older sister Kuroka shimmered into her room by the small desk she was given. It's been a long time, Shirin. I believe it's time we have a talk. Kuroka said calmly as she walked over. Kuroka smiled, but she had to quickly block a punch from her sister. What are you doing here? Kaneko said angrily, trying to attack her sister with everything she had. Calm down, Shirin. I just want to show you something. Kuroka smiled. What is it? Kaneko wondered, pulling away from her sister. Kuroka activated a magic circle, and Kaneko watched as a small and shallow gray dish appeared on her desk. Then Kuroka placed her right hand on her head, and Kaneko watched as a small stray of gray matter appeared and, almost like it was destined to do so, fell into the gray bowl. This is called a pensive. It's a powerful artifact that can be used to store memories. Why are you showing me this? Kaneko wondered. Because I want you to know the truth about why I really killed our former master and why I was forced to abandon you for all these years. All you need to do is stick your head in and you'll see my memories of that time, Kuroka said calmly before placing it on the bed and backing up. Why should I trust you? Kaneko said warily. This seemed far too convenient. Kuroka was visibly hurt by the response, but realized there was only one way. It's impossible to manipulate a pensive, so I can assure you it's genuine. Kuroka replied, though she did stare at it to her spot far away from Kaneko. Kaneko was hesitant at first, but she realized that her sister had come all this way to show her this and wasn't being violent at all. The fact she could finally answer a question that had bothered her for years didn't hurt. Dipping her head down, she watched her sister deal with extraordinarily painful experiments done to her by the devil who took them in from the Nibirius clan. She watched her sister endure painful experiments, but always come back with a smile to her at the end of the day. She watched her former master reveal that he was going to start experimenting on her, and Kuroka responding by slaughtering him in cold blood and saying, "You'll never get your filthy hands on Shirin." Kaneko could feel the tears in her eyes form as her sister dragged her away from the house and left her hidden while she escaped her pursuers. As Kaneko left the pensive, she only had one thought in her mind. Big sister Kaneko cried and her sister responded by walking over to her and hugging her tightly. Shirin, I'm so sorry for abandoning you. Would you ever forgive me? Kuroka said with tears forming on her face. I forgive you on one condition. Kaneko said, trying to gather herself. Anything, Shirin? Kuroka said with hope in her eyes. Call me Kaneko. I want to put the past behind me and I'm Kaneko now. Alright alright Kaneko. Kuroka smiled before making the pensive disappear. Kuroka walked over to the bed and sat down with her legs crossed with her sister soon following. The Kuroka's shocked Kaneko's wide ears and tail appeared on her body before she lied on her sister's lap, and a large smile appeared on Kuroka's face as she stroked her sister's ears and enjoyed a moment many years in the making. Ria's Gremory was thrilled and everyone around her knew why. Today was the day that Issei Hyoudou arrived at her home. His month with the kendo club was over and now he was with her and her peerage for the next month. Sure, it was mostly due to supernatural business, but that didn't matter. Try not to look too excited, Rias. You know he's here on business, right? Valerie Lucifer reminded her as she stood in her leather outfit as they waited in front of the mansion for Issei to arrive. Surrounding her was the remainder of peerage dressed in Kuoh's uniform and Valerie's peerage dressed in their usual outfits besides Le Fay, who decided to dress in the Kuoh uniform in order to test a plan that Valerie had to help deal with her odd situation with Issei. I know, Valerie, but I can't help but be excited. Rias admitted. The Lucifer and Gremory heiresses may have started out badly, but Valerie helped her not only deal with the Kendo's issues, but Kaneko's as well. Whatever, Valerie replied as she rolled her eyes. A few minutes later the carriage carrying the group arrived and a smiling Issei hopped out with Irina, Zenobia and Azazel behind him. What's up everybody? Issei waved with a smile as Irina and Zenobia acknowledged the group as well. Rias walked up to Issei and stood a few feet away. I'd like to welcome you to my humble abode. Rias said with a pleasant smile and a small courtesy, much to the amusement of everyone else. Issei rolled his eyes also, but decided to have a little fun himself. I thank you for the privilege, Lady Gremory, and I hope that my presence won't be a problem. Issei replied before shocking everyone by grabbing Ria's hand and placing a small kiss on it. Way to lay it on thick, Issei, Valerie deadpanned. Issei walked towards the Lucifer heiress and smiled. I missed you too, Valerie. I must confess I'm surprised to see you brought everyone from your little crew. Issei smirked, noticing Kuroka, and then paused when he saw Le Fay. Hello. Le Fay said bashfully, wondering how this encounter would be when compared to their last one. Hello to you too, Miss Pendragon. Issei replied with a surprising amount of calm to the shock of everyone. It worked, Valerie thought to herself. This was a game changer. Okay guys, let's get moved in. We can have reunion talks later. Azazel smiled, wanting everyone to get focused. Of course, Issei replied calmly as he walked into the Gremory mansion. A smiling Issei relaxed in his room after a very amusing first day in the underworld. It took Issei all of 30 minutes to get his stuff set up in his room, and not even 5 minutes later Yumi and Carloman barged into his room with obvious intentions. They didn't leave the room till 4 hours later with big smiles on their faces. After being introduced to Lord and Lady Gremory along with Ria's nephew Milikas, Issei had a relatively simple dinner which suited him nicely. The best part of the dinner was that most of it was spent talking about the Gremory group's training. Since everyone knew that Issei spent his time with the kendo club and they didn't really want to discuss what happened. This went well, Issei commented as he thought to the way things played out. So far nobody was aware of just what happened with the kendo club besides Azazel, and that's all that mattered. Yes, but you're going to need to discuss the elephant in the room sooner or later. Drake reminded him out loud since they were alone. Yeah, Issei replied before he received a knock on his door. Come on in, Issei shouted, and in walked Rias once again. Hey there, Rias said with a smile. She was in a sheer pink V-cut nightgown that showed off her magnificent breasts. Hey yourself. Issei smiled. This might sound like a weird request to say, but can I cuddle with you for a little bit? I may not be one of your lovers, but I would like to know what it's like just once. Rias said bashfully. What's like? Issei asked with a smile on his face. Rias blushed heavily but realized he was teasing her. I'd like to know what it's like to have the Red Dragon Emperor in my arms as a passionate lover. Rias confessed. Alright, but how about I do you one better? Issei smiled as he got up from the bed. Rias said in disbelief. Did she hear him right? One better would suggest that Issei was actually about to sleep with her. You heard me, Rias. How about instead of just cuddling with me, you get the full Issei experience, and not as a punishment? Issei smiled as he walked over to Rias with a calm stride. This isn't a joke, is it? You're going to actually have sex with me this time, right? You're not going to just fuck my ass brutally and leave, Rias said, nervously recalling the time Issei claimed her anal virginity before Issei trained Gasper. Issei smiled as he arrived in front of Rias and wrapped his arms around her waist. That's right, Rias. I'm going to fuck you properly. So what do you say? Issei smiled. He soon got his answer when Ria slammed her lips against his. As she relaxed against Issei's naked body, Ria should have been thrilled, but instead of being happy, Ria's couldn't help but wonder why the sudden change. She shouldn't have been complaining, but it simply wasn't Issei's style. "Hey Issei," Ria's asked as she moved her head towards the man who took her front and back virginities. "What is it?" Ria's Issei replied before pecking her on the lips. "Why now?" Ria's wondered, ignoring how much she enjoyed Issei's lips against hers. "Why now?" what Issei replied again. Ria's twitched internally because Issei was messing around. If anything, it all but confirmed that he had a less than honorable reason for sleeping with her. "Why did you decide to sleep with me tonight? We both know you have plenty of options, and I'm typically not one of them. What are you hiding?" Ria's frowned. "My trip to the beach wasn't as cut and dry as everyone thinks," Issei replied. In other words, he slept with her to soften the blow of some bad news. "So what happened?" Ria's pouted. "A member of the Cows Brigade ran into the girls from the club on their way back from a spot trip and kidnapped them," Issei deadpanned. Ria's gasped a bit but quickly calmed down. If anything major happened, Issei would have gone on a rampage and she would have known by now, so what's the damage? Ria's wondered. Issei smiled before kissing her on the lips again, ironically enough very little. "Due to some luck on my end, I was able to safely get to the girls and they were unharmed. After Irina and Zenobia saved them, I tortured the hell out of the guy who kidnapped them before killing him," Issei said nonchalantly. I see. Ria's sweat dropped. The nonchalance with which he said he tortured and killed another human being was slightly terrifying. "The girls accepted everything, and in due time I was forced to reveal you guys, but the girls promised to keep it a secret. Cadis's aunt was the only other person involved and we erased her memories instantly. Actually, I wonder if the girls all decided to keep it a secret because of that." Issei smiled. Knowing he could erase their memories was terrifying, and that probably made it easier to keep a secret. The sex helped also. Ria's wanted to be angry at him, but the fact that there was no harm done was a good thing. "Is there anything else you wanted to talk to me about, or should I just leave until your real partner for tonight comes?" Ria said with a bit of mirth. "There is one more thing actually, and this one is a bit of a doozy." Issei smiled bitterly as he got out of the bed and walked over to his desk. "What else happened?" Ria's wondered as she leaned up. "Just before I left, I asked Valerie to see if she could look into the incident that got Asia kicked out and see if she could figure out what happened to her," Issei admitted as he looked through his backpack for the photo he printed out during the small time period he was at home. "You found out who the devil was?" Ria stated. Admittedly, she was curious about that herself, but since she was careful about triggering things with her peerage, never bothered to ask. "Yes, I did. Valerie got a photo of him on a flash drive and she gave it to me while I was at the beach. Naturally, I printed it out when I had a chance, so." Issei smiled before reaching for the photo and handing it to the naked heiress. It took all of 3 seconds for a look of horror to appear on Ria's face. "Issei, is there any chance at all that this photo is faked?" Ria's asked with a mix of fury and sadness on her face. Issei could see the thin veil of power forming around her body. "None," Issei replied. Ria's gave Issei back the photo and walked over to the bed. If Issei could see her face right now, he would see a level of fury that was almost unheard of from the young woman. "Well Issei, I know who this is, and right now I'm so furious I could scream. I want you to fuck the anger out of me, now," Ria's requested as she got back on the bed and got into Issei's favorite doggy-style position and spread her pee for him. "That can be arranged," Issei smiled before going back to the bed and fucking Ria's until early the morning to calm her down. Issei had a feeling that if he hadn't, Ria's would have done something similar to what he did to the Cows Brigade member, to the person who she was talking about. Not that Issei minded at all. Issei reveals some major secrets, and Ria's gets a surprising house guest. The very solemn Ria sat on one of the chairs in her living room, with Azazel taking a second chair and the 2 dragon emperors sitting on the opposite sides of the large couch in the room. She called the White Dragon Empress and the Fallen Leader to discuss what Issei told her and figure out just what else was hidden from her. Unfortunately for Ria's, she didn't know how to bring up everything she had learned. Fortunately for her, Valerie did. "I take it Issei told you about the photo." Valerie smiled as she enjoyed her coffee. "Among other things." Ria's admitted, bashfully sipping her tea. Any joy she had from Issei finally taking her virginity had been lost due to the revelations. "We can worry about the kendo club later, let's focus on the real elephant in the room." "The identity of this young man," Azazel said sternly before revealing a photo of a young man with dark green hair and fancy clothes and golden eyes that were squinting slightly. Ria's expression soured due to the photo and the reminder of the kendo club being aware of the supernatural. However, she would focus on the photo first. "The person in the photo is Diodora Astereth, the younger brother of Mayojuka Beelzebub," Ria's revealed. "You've gotta be kidding me," Issei cursed. This was a disaster for various reasons. "That's not all Issei, I'm pretty sure he was also responsible for having those fallen angels bring Asia to Kuoh," as revealed to the shock of Azazel and Valerie and the growing annoyance of Issei. When she interrogated Rainer, the Fallen told her that the person who hired her only wanted her to keep Asia's body safe. At the time, she didn't think much of it, but now she realized why that request was made. She was positive that Diodora was going to eventually come himself and after killing the Fallen before taking Asia's dead body and make her his servant. That thought revolted her since it was very similar to her plan for Issei. Hopefully he's had enough, but I doubted. Issei scowled, causing everyone to look at him funny. What's that supposed to mean? Issei frowned. Diodora was so desperate to get Asia for himself that he took on an entire compound of exorcists just for the chance to get at her. He will be back for a third attempt, and this one won't be as subtle as his last few. What makes you say that? Valerie said with a raised eyebrow. Before I became Kendo club manager, I watched a club from a tree right near the Kendo club using see-through goggles I got off the internet. I would have continued for who knows how long had Mitsuda and Motohama not ran close to my area and caused me to drop the goggles, Issei admitted with a bitter chuckle. What happened next? Rias wondered with intrigue. Murayama discovered the goggles and confronted me about it. I admitted that I wanted her and said if she wanted to turn me in, she could. Issei revealed to the amusement of Valerie and Azazel. But instead she gave you back your goggles and decided to taunt you, figuring you'd still be watching. She wanted to know what the hidden dragon was really like and she used her body to do it. Valerie continued. That's right. Eventually I confronted her. And we agreed to a spar where if I won she would become mine. Humorously, the rest of club got involved when they realized she might lose, and before long I had conquered the whole club. Eventually I became the manager since it would make it easier to explain my presence to anybody troublesome who decided to start asking questions. Though, I am curious how you knew about my old nickname. Issei said with a look of slight annoyance on his face. I found your buddies peeping on the swim club a few days after I got to Kuoh and blackmailed them into telling me about you. It's kinda funny to think that you were such a secretive pervert before and now you have girls all over you. Valerie chuckled. Rias was stunned by this news since it explained a few things. Why Issei was with the club in the first place and why Sona allowed it at the time, putting Issei's Kendo club situation to the side. Do you honestly think Diodora will try again? Rias said in disbelief. Yes, I do. The only question is when would he try next and how would he go about doing that? I may have an answer for that. Azazel said sheepishly. What's going on, Zaz? Valerie said with a hint of annoyance. I was supposed to hide this, but your brother is planning on announcing a rating game tournament among the youth devils at the end of the meeting. The participants are to be Rias, Sona, Diodora Astaroth, Sarag Bale, Zephyr Glaciolabolas, and Sikvara Gares. Hold on a minute, what happened to Megumi? Rias interrupted. The tournament was a shock, but the fact that Zephyr was involved shocked her a bit. Apparently, she was defeated by Zephyr in a rating game a month before we came back. I don't know what else became of her since then, but we can focus on that later. Azazel revealed. Basically, they're going to have these guys fight it out in mock rating games to get them used to fighting to prepare for an eventual Chaos Brigade attack. Valerie deadpanned, aware of what a stupid idea this was and the major mistake that they made. Pretty much, Azazel replied. Just lovely. A rating game is the perfect chance to snag Asia, and I can think of a few scenarios that he could use to do it. Issei deadpanned. So could I, Azazel admitted. Same with me. They're playing a dangerous game. Valerie confirmed. Rias frowned since she could think of a way or two herself. Asia was in clear danger, and there was no telling what would happen next. Hey Valerie, can I ask you a favor? Rias wondered. If it's about me giving you some of my friends to act as your peerage, the answer is no. Valerie insisted. Fine. Rias pouted before turning to Issei, hoping all was forgiven. Sorry Rias, but I'm staying away also. Who knows, you might be able to find somebody to act as your servant sooner or later anyway. Issei smiled. Rias pouted since she needed some new firepower and she had no idea how to get it. All of a sudden Akeno ran into the room. Rias, we have a situation. What happened to Akeno? Rias wondered. I sensed somebody appear in our territory and when I went to investigate, I found a young woman collapsed on the ground. She's currently resting in one of the spare bedrooms, Akeno explained. Take me to her. Rias said quickly since this was a major situation. Somebody in her territory was a problem, especially considering the new situation with the Chaos Brigade. As everyone made their way towards the young woman in question, the already tricky situation appeared to be getting more so. As the group approached the guest room, a part of Issei wondered if this was a good idea. Ria's territory was vast, and for this person to appear in an area so close to the home was beyond suspicious. Are you sure this is wise, allowing this person into your house, Rias? Issei questioned. No, but considering we have Grafia, Valerie and Azazel along with you, I'd say I'm fine. Rias replied. Issei, Valerie and Azazel went without saying, but it was easy to forget that Grafia was one of the strongest women in the underworld outside of Male Leviathan. Alright, Issei nodded as they opened the door and found their still sleeping guest with the covers over her body. She had long purple hair and appeared to be in her teens, but Issei could feel a powerful aura coming off her. Who is she, Akeno? Rias wondered. I don't know, but we couldn't just leave her collapsed in the middle of our territory, Akeno explained. Well, the good news is she's just sleeping, Issei said calmly. The girls looked towards the girl and noticed that her chest was moving up and down slightly, indicating she was just tired, but what was also hard to miss was that she had a very large pair of breasts below the sheets she was covered in. Grafia, can you watch her for now, and when she wakes up find out everything you can about her? Rias requested. Of course. Grafia replied. Well, I guess I'm gonna go relax, Issei said calmly before going back to his room. Alright. We'll be training outside if you want us, Rias revealed, and Issei simply nodded. As much as Issei wanted to relax, there was something about the new girl that just bugged him. Hey Drake, did you get an odd feeling around that girl, or was it just me? Issei muttered to himself. I did too, partner, Drake replied. I see. Issei frowned. This was incredibly suspicious, and Issei for one didn't like it. Issei's musing was interrupted by a knock on the door. May I come in? Valerie Lucifer asked calmly. Sure, Issei replied, and Valerie walked in, choosing to stand by the door to make it clear this wouldn't be her usual flirtation attempt. Did you get an odd feeling from the new girl also? Valerie said calmly. Issei's eyes narrowed further, since that wasn't good. Yes, I did. I can't explain why she bothers me, but she does, and I don't like it, Issei replied. Do you think she could be from the Cow's Brigade and she was sent as a spy? Valerie wondered. I don't think so, but we'll have to wait until she wakes up to know more, Issei replied calmly. Alright. Valerie replied calmly before focusing on another subject. Care to explain why you can hold it together when you're around LeFay? If I hadn't interfered the other day, I'm pretty sure you would have raped and or killed LeFay. Issei had the nerve to look bashful as he was reminded of that mess. I don't quite get it either. My guess is that if LeFay identifies herself as a witch, LL be hostile. If she dresses any other way, we're fine. I see, Valerie said with an odd look on her face. What's the matter, Valerie? Issei noticed, realizing the tension coming from the Lucifer heiress. A few days before you arrived, Azazel suggested that I re-enter the world of devils, and I'm not sure whether I should accept or not, Valerie admitted. If I were you, I wouldn't. I don't know much about devil politics, but what we do know is that your grandfather is not well liked by the devils of today. If you revealed yourself, it would just lead to more headaches, especially since we're about to reveal the Cow's Brigade's existence to the world, Issei admitted. I see, Valerie replied with a confused expression. Issei was right, and considering her grandfather's reputation, it was a dangerous game. Plus, there's another problem that you'd have if you chose to return. Issei smirked, knowing this would break the odd mood. What's that? Ria's brother is technically Lord Lucifer. If you were to return, what would they call you? Issei smiled. Valerie paused for a second before chuckling, since he had a point. That would be awkward. Valerie smiled, since that was an interesting thing. Plus, you don't strike me as a politics type. Though I bet you would look pretty hot in a dress. Issei smiled, causing Valerie to blush. You think so? Valerie replied. Oh yeah. I mean, you look pretty good in that leather outfit of yours, and you make the female uniform look pretty good. I bet you'd look great in an evening dress. Issei smiled. Hey, he always did find Valerie attractive, and the only major block was LeFay. So if I were, Valerie started to say before a knock on the door interrupted them. Sorry to interrupt whatever's going on in there. But our guest is awake, Irina spoke from outside. Thanks, Irina. Valerie and I were just chatting, Issei replied. So you can keep it in your pants after all. That's good to know, considering the number of girls you have to satisfy, Irina deadpanned. Yeah, we'll be there in a moment. Issei deadpanned himself as Valerie looked on and chuckled. Let's go, Valerie smiled as she started to put a plan in place to join Issei's growing harem. With the LeFay situation taken care of, she now had everything she needed. Valerie and Issei went back into the room where the mysterious girl laid, and admittedly both were curious about the young woman in question. Opening the door, they were met with a beautiful young woman who appeared to be in her late teens with orange eyes, along with the long purple hair from before. She was wearing a white noble dress that exposed a massive pair of breasts with white sleeves that led to purple gloves and high slits. She was also wearing a black miniskirt with black thigh-high boots. Is this everyone? The young girl asked in a soft voice. These are the most important people, Grafia said calmly. Irina and the others were going to be introduced to her later. The young girl turned towards Issei and Valerie and smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you, everyone. My name is Ingvild Leviathan, and I am a descendant of the original Mao Leviathan. Valerie immediately summoned her divine dividing and pointed it towards the young girl. Why is she still here, Oz? She's clearly a spy for the old Mao faction. Valerie said angrily. That couldn't be farther from the truth, the now named Ingvild replied firmly. Really? Valerie scowled. Yes, and please let me explain, Ingvild replied, and for some reason Valerie calmed down. What the hell? It's like I can't resist that girl. Valerie thought to herself. She really didn't like this, but she had no choice. Alright, Valerie scowled before dispelling her gear. My father was a low-ranking member of the Leviathan clan who fell in love with a human many years ago. When I was born, Kateria tried to get rid of me, but my father's aides took me away and hid me in what is now known as Greece. There I was trained and taught how to use my powers, including my sacred gear, in case I was discovered again. Do you have a sacred gear? Valerie questioned. Yes, Ingvild replied before focusing herself as a blue crown appeared on her head. Impossible. Azazel gasped. You know about my power? Ingvild said with a bit of surprise. Of course I do. That's Neri Kiri, one of the 13 Longinus. It gives the user incredible water control and control of dragons. Azazel revealed, causing Valerie and Issei's eyes to widen. That would explain the odd feeling I got from her earlier and what happened just now. Valerie admitted. Yeah, and it's also why we have to protect her, especially from the Cows Brigade. Valerie here is the White Dragon Emperor and I am Issei Hyoudou, the Red Dragon Emperor. Your power could be used to control us, which would be a big problem. Issei revealed. I see, Ingvild replied in shock. If you were in Greece this whole time, what are you doing in my territory? Riaz wondered. Something about this story stunk and Riaz really didn't like it. Ingvild had a solemn look on her face when Riaz asked the question, but realized it was her only hope. My aides realized that it was only a matter of time until Kateria found me again, so in order to protect me, they decided to put me to a deep sleep and hide my body in a special temple in the Aegean Sea. I woke up earlier today and saw a note from my aides that told me to seek out the Grimoire along with coordinates to your territory and teleported to seek you out. Unfortunately, I was still weak from being asleep for so long and I simply collapsed again, Ingvild admitted bashfully. I see. Well, I am Riaz Grimoire and I will gladly give you my protection. Riaz said calmly. There were parts of her story that were suspicious, but she wasn't going to turn down a guest, and especially one as powerful as she was. Thank you, Ingvild replied with a beaming smile. Why don't we introduce you to the others in the meantime? Riaz smiled warmly. How about we get some food first? I'm sure Ingvild here must be starving. Issei suggested. Yes, I am rather hungry. Ingvild replied bashfully. Okay then. Grafia, why don't you make some food for this young lady? Meanwhile I'll introduce her to the others. Riaz suggested. Okay, Ingvild said happily. That's fine and good, but I need to talk to Azazel here. Issei said calmly. Care to explain what about? Riaz wondered. Private matter. Don't worry, it's nothing dangerous. Issei explained. Riaz was about to protest, but Azazel interrupted. Let's go, kid. Azazel chuckled as he led Issei away, leaving Riaz to introduce her to the rest of the group. While Ingvild was introduced to the other supernatural members of the group, Azazel led Issei to a private room where the topic in question was relatively obvious. She's quite suspicious, isn't she? Azazel smiled. Yes, she is, but we'll know more soon enough. If I know Riaz, she'll want a display of Ingvild's power in order to determine if she could be in her peerage. Agreed, and I'm curious how strong she is also. Azazel smiled as they walked back. After some lunch, Riaz brought Ingvild into the main garden in order to test her power. As for her opponent, Riaz herself. Are you ready, Ingvild? Riaz said calmly, dressed in a purple and white tracksuit with tennis shoes. Yes, I am, Ingvild said calmly, still in her outfit. The Keno was acting as the referee and lifted her hand into the air. Battle begin, the Keno shouted, and the two were off. Try this on for size, Riaz said calmly, focusing her magic and sending a small ball of energy at the young woman. It wasn't much, but it would serve as a nice test. Ingvild looked at Riaz with steely eyes and focused her own magic as a blue circle appeared. Take this. Ingvild shouted and a small water serpent flew at Riaz. No surprise, she's a water magic user. Sadly, that won't be enough. Riaz smiled. Brace yourself, Riaz, Valerie warned. Valerie was quickly proven right when Ria's attack was pierced by Ingvild's serpent and flew towards her, forcing the Grimoire heiress to jump out of the way. I'm not done, Ingvild shouted as she sprang towards a stunned Riaz with a sharp blade of water. What the? Riaz shouted as Ingvild approached and she took to the air. Instead of panicking, Ingvild looked up with her palms heading towards Riaz. Try this on for size. Ingvild shouted, firing a larger water serpent. Shit, Riaz cursed before focusing far more energy and using her own magic to cancel out the strike. To those watching, it was hard to believe that this girl was overpowering Riaz so easily. Damn, this isn't good. Valerie smirked. For Riaz this is bad. For us this is very good, Issei smiled. How so? Valerie questioned with a strange gaze. Her power rivals Riaz and she's skilled in both close and long-range combat. She would be a marvelous addition to any peerage. Issei smiled. True. Shame that she's so much stronger than Riaz. Issei smiled as she watched the Grimoire heiress get pushed back. You're mistaken. Grafia said calmly next to them. How so? Riaz is getting pushed back easily. Issei pointed out. Riaz is only a little bit stronger than Ingvild, but our guest is more experienced. Milady has very little experience fighting against people around her level, and it's showing. The only person stronger than her among the youth devils is her cousin Serge Bale, but he's more of a brawler. In a backwards way, she's the perfect peerage member for Rias. She'll force her to become a smarter fighter as well. Valerie smiled. Exactly. Though this will no doubt hurt Ria's pride. Grafia said calmly. The battle continued for a few more minutes, and Grafia's point held true. Rias was able to take everything Ingvild tossed at her, but she was struggling to do so. After a few more minutes Grafia decided that was enough. Ladies, that's enough, Grafia shouted with a small display of her own power, and the girls stopped. That was incredible, Rias panted, not expecting her to be so good. Thank you, Ingvild panted herself. How about we take a break to relax? Grafia suggested. Fine by me. I'm exhausted. Rias groaned. It had been ages since she was pushed like that. Issei sat in his room alone after the crazy first day with Ingvild came to an end. After the break Ingvild fought against Valerie, who utterly dominated the Leviathan heiress. Considering divine dividing's power, that didn't surprise Issei, and unlike Rias, Valerie was skilled at close range. Issei was supposed to be next, but Azazel interfered for some reason. Saying that Ingvild just came back and should rest was enough. He was brought from his musing by a knock on the door from somebody. Come on in, Issei said calmly, figuring it was one of the girls for a booty call. To his surprise the door opened and Ingvild walked in wearing a low-cut blue nightgown that showed off her healthy amount of cleavage. He wasn't sure where she got it from, but he wasn't complaining. Hello Issei, Ingvild said calmly. Mind if I ask what you're doing here? Issei admitted. I've slept alone for millennia and I didn't want to be alone again. Given the way people were looking at you throughout the day, I thought I would be most comfortable around you. Ingvild said bashfully. Her reasoning was amusing, and denying a pretty girl wasn't his style. There was something that he was curious about. Where did you get that outfit? Issei said with a raised eyebrow. Ingvild blushed before saying, I asked Ms. Grafia if I could borrow something to sleep in instead of my dress, and she used magic to give me this. Then come on in. Issei started to say before a frown formed on his face. What's the matter? Ingvild said nervously. I have to deal with something troublesome. Issei frowned, getting up from his spot on the bed. One of the kendo girls had called for him, and their timing couldn't be worse. When will you be back? Ingvild wondered. I don't know. Hopefully not too long, Issei said with a bit of annoyance before vanishing in a magic circle. Issei POV. As the magic circle faded, I found myself in a bedroom back in Kuoh, and in front of one of my kendo girls, Haruna. I thought I made it clear this was for emergencies only, and not booty calls, I said with a stern face, as I stared at the very naked captain of the kendo club. Haruna was a third year with black hair that she cut short and light red eyes. She was medium height with high C-cup breasts and slightly tanned skin. Haruna considered herself one of Ria's rivals and would have probably been a candidate for one of Kuoh's top women if not for Ria's existence. I couldn't help it. The idea that you were over at Ria's house bothered me, and little Issei isn't exactly complaining. Haruna smiled, causing me to twitch. I'm leaving, Haruna. This is strike 1, and 3 strikes means you'll be out of the rotation for 2 months. I typically restricted himself to only a few kendo club girls a day, and I rotated so the girls could all have their fun. Haruna being out of it for 2 months was a major punishment. Fine, Haruna relented. Aye for now, Haruna. I deadpanned before leaving via the circle. Sadly for me, it wouldn't be my first interruption of the night. Normal POV. Ingvild Leviathan opened her orange eyes ready for her second day in the Gremory mansion, and she immediately wished she hadn't. In front of her was Valerie Lucifer, and she was in just a pair of silver panties, but that wasn't why she wished she had done it. She wished she hadn't because Valerie was bobbing up and down Issei's shaft. Good morning, Ingvild. Valerie smiled, causing the Leviathan heiress to blush heavily. What are you doing, Valerie? Ingvild stammered, not expecting this. Her aides had told her about sexual intercourse, but for obvious reasons she was a virgin. The fact that Issei appeared to be significantly larger than the picture she remembered was another matter. I wanted to have some fun with Issei since he doesn't let me normally. I kinda forgot you were here. Valerie said bashfully, which was only half true. What happens if he wakes up in the middle of you doing it? Ingvild wondered. I'm using a special sleeping spell on him. He won't have any idea what's going on unless one of us tells him. Valerie smirked before resuming her motions. Ingvild watched the Lucifer heiress tease Issei's shaft with a combination of her impressive breasts, skilled tongue in her mouth. How can he sleep through this? Ingvild wondered to herself as the ministrations continued. A part of Ingvild was shocked by the display, but another part was greatly aroused since Valerie was giving it everything he had. Just as she finally considered pleasuring herself, Valerie spoke up. Here we go, Valerie said, happily aware that Issei's member was throbbing underneath her. Here what goes? Ingvild wondered, but got her answer when Valerie's mouth seemed to expand out of nowhere. Ingvild watched as a small white liquid leaked from Valerie's lips, and she blushed heavily since that meant he had ejaculated inside her mouth. Valerie pulled away with bulging cheeks and swallowed the load with a smile. That was fun. Now to get out of here before Issei wakes up. Too late, Issei deadpanned to the shock of both girls. How long have you been awake? Valerie said bashfully, hoping the sleeping spell she cast would have lasted longer. Thus now actually, Issei groaned, leaning up to go eye to eye with the naked Lucifer heiress. He was so used to morning blowjobs that he couldn't even find it in him to be annoyed. Honestly, he expected one of the girls to come see him anyway despite Ingvild being there, but Valerie was admittedly a surprise. Then again, he wasn't about to complain since Valerie had an amazing body. Well, since you're up, do you want to continue? Valerie said bashfully. No. Issei said coldly, causing Valerie to flinch. On that note, see ya, Valerie said whimsically, hopping off the bed and leaving the room with a smile on her face and a sway on her hips. I'm going to go also. Ingvild said with a blush as she got up to leave. See ya, Issei smiled, trying to keep his composure as the two girls left. It was quite the morning and he had the distinct feeling it was just the beginning. This is Azazel written all over it. Drake chuckled, his voice appearing on Issei's hand in the form of a green magic circle. No doubt, and Valerie wasn't going to turn down a chance to do something with me. By the way, we could have gotten rid of that sleeping spell the minute she cast it. Why didn't you? Issei questioned the dragon inside him. Because you needed to relieve yourself, partner. You had 3 false alarms last night and I know that it drove you a little batty. Drake chuckled. Don't remind me, Issei groaned in annoyance. Haruna wasn't the only kendo club member to try and get some Issei time last night. Clarissa and another member tried their luck just for Issei to rebuff them. A part of him found it adorable, but another part found it annoying. At any rate, it was time to begin the second day with the young Leviathan and go from there. At any rate. Whether they like it or not, you are the X factor in everything. Riaz knows it, which is why she's going to do everything in her power to make the Leviathan her servant. My rival's host adores you and you're also incredibly powerful. Leverage that as much as you can. Drake explained. That's what I'm going to do. Ingvild's appearance does make this whole thing far more interesting than I care for, Issei groaned. True, but you've known that this was going to be a headache for some time. The Fallen's revelation about the upcoming meeting just makes it more so. Drake reminded him. Yep, and now it's time to start yet another day in paradise, Issei said sarcastically as he moved to get ready. This vacation was always going to be interesting, and with the events of the last day and a half, Issei knew he was in for a wild ride. Riaz, Valerie and Ingvild deal with their dragon issue. Unknown area. People say that the most important meetings in history are the ones that happen behind closed doors. The ones that nobody knows about besides those involved, and right now one of those meetings was about to take place. This meeting was taking place inside a large room with blue tiles all around, and in the middle of the room was a small seating area with ice crystals sticking up. Here we are, Riaz smiled as she walked into said room with 2 other young women. The first was Valerie Lucifer, the up until now hidden heiress of the Lucifer clan, and finally Ingvild Leviathan, the newly revealed Leviathan heiress. All 3 girls had towels wrapped around their supple bodies, with Valerie letting her hair out for once and Ingvild sticking with her usual hairstyle. Holy crap, this is one hell of a secret base. Valerie smiled as she looked at the large area. Thank you, but right now we're here for business instead of pleasure, a new voice revealed. The voice in question belonged to the heiress of the Citri clan, Sona Citri. Sorry to have to call you like this, Sona, but I figured that it would be easier to discuss this with you now than surprise you later. Riaz said bashfully as she looked at the towel-clad figure of Sona Citri. The room in question was Sona's secret and she used the room for private occasions such as these. Sona got a good look at the 3 girls and couldn't help but frown due to the fact that the other 3 girls had massive breasts and she did not. It's alright, Sona said calmly as she sat down. It's been a week since Ingvild's appearance and Riaz thought it was time to discuss how to deal with Ingvild with the other 2 girls who would be most affected by it in Sona and Valerie. She could have invited Sikvera Agares also, but Riaz wanted to add Ingvild to her peerage and bringing those 2 in would complicate matters. The other 3 girls figured that out, but they weren't going to call Riaz out just yet. So this is the mysterious heiress of the Leviathan. She certainly looks nothing like Kateria, Sona said calmly, causing Ingvild to flinch. We've already had tests done and it's the truth. I believe Ingvild can be trusted. Riaz said calmly. You mean because she keeps kicking your ass when you spar and instead of lording it over you she's almost regretful? Valerie snickered, causing Riaz to blush. After their first matchup, Riaz and Ingvild fought 3 more times, with Riaz losing each time. It was a stark contrast to Valerie, who dominated the Leviathan heiress each time. To be fair, she hasn't used her sacred gear against you, Riaz reminded her, causing Valerie to twitch slightly. That gear would change things nicely, and that was a problem Valerie knew very well. So what type of magic do you use? Sona wondered. If she was a true Leviathan she should be a water magic user. Looking back, she was a little shocked Kateria didn't use water against Azazel and the group. I use water magic. Ingvild said calmly, aware this was a test and confirming Sona's suspicion. I see Sona frowned before turning back to Riaz. So you've called this meeting and I'm curious what it's about. Sona frowned. Riaz did want to get to Ingvild also, but that was the second topic to discuss. We have a situation with our friend Diodora. Riaz revealed, causing Sona's eyes to narrow. As she continued to explain Diodora and Asia's history, Sona's frown only seemed to grow. That explains why, Sona said with a hint of annoyance. Why what? Did something happen? Riaz wondered. A few days ago Azazel came by with Issei and Azazel gave my team a group of artificial sacred gears. He said that I would need them for the upcoming battles and suggested I face Issei as a test. Sona revealed. So that's why they left. That jerk is hiding stuff again, Valerie cursed. Azazel suggested a few days ago that they take Ingvild into town to get her used to the current society. They did just that with Valerie, Riaz, Akeno, Arena and Zenobia acting as escorts. I'm more curious how Issei did against your servants. Riaz admitted. He crushed everyone including Tsubaki. Sona said bitterly. She knew Issei was strong, but knowing that her whole peerage couldn't win against him was infuriating. I see, Riaz said with her own frustrations. Issei's power was just as vexing as the odd dynamic between the two. Is Issei really that strong? Ingvild wondered in confusion. If we're talking raw power, he's a little stronger than Riaz, but combined with his sacred gear, he's a monster. I'm actually lucky my gear contradicts his so much or I'd be in deep trouble, Valerie admitted. I see. Ingvild said curiously. Shame he's not a devil like us. I bet in a little while he gives Serg a fight, Riaz smiled. Serg, Valerie and Ingvild said curiously. Riaz's cousin Serg Bale. He's the strongest youth devil of our group and by a fair margin. He's a pure brawler as well. Sona explained. Somebody as strong as Issei, huh? That sounds interesting. Valerie said with a smile. What are you planning, Valerie? Riaz said with narrowed eyes. I was thinking maybe it's time I make my grand return and this is just another reason to do it. Valerie admitted. Really, Riaz said with her eyes widened. She knew Valerie was thinking about it more recently, but for her to go through with it, it was a shock. Yeah. I've decided I'm going to, Valerie started to say before a magic circle appeared by her ear. Valerie, I know you're busy with your girl thing, but we got a major problem. Biku shouted through the circle. What's going on, Biku? Valerie said nervously. It's our boy Issei. LeFay got careless and was training with Kuroka, and our boy saw her in her magician's outfit. Biku explained. Valerie's eyes widened since that was a disaster waiting to happen. You've gotta be kidding me, and on today of all days. I'll be there soon, Biku. Valerie shouted before the circle faded. What happened? Riaz said nervously. Valerie didn't panic very often and she was clearly panicking now. Somehow Issei's freaking curse activated and now he's on a rampage. Riaz and Sona's eyes widened for various reasons. What curse? Riaz spoke up since he was in her territory and a curse would be a bit of a problem. Valerie got up and tossed her towel before activating a magic circle that put her back in her leather outfit thanks to a previous wielder. Issei can't be around LeFay when she's in her mage uniform. I forgot about it because LeFay's been wearing other crap around the house, but I guess we got careless. Naturally this happens when Zaz had to take Arena and Zenobia back to the human world to deal with the fucking kendo club and Grafia is with Surziches on business, Valerie groaned. Ria's eyes widened because now the 4 people that could stop Issei reasonably were gone. We have to get going, Ria said nervously. Yeah, no kidding. Ingvild, it might be time for your sacred gear. Valerie said nervously. She could help but depending on how bad it got things could get disastrous. Audit, Ingvild said sternly and ready to fight. What about me? Sona spoke up wanting to know if she could help. Let us deal with this, Sona, Riaz insisted. It wasn't pride that stopped her, but the fact that she had to do this herself. Be careful, Sona said, nervously aware that this was a dangerous situation. I will, Riaz replied with a bitter smile as the girls rushed to grab their clothes and get back before it was too late. The 3 girls arrived back at the outer part of the mansion to find Akeno, Shulin, Yumi, Gasper and Asia on the ground with bruises all around. Fortunately they were just knocked out. Looks like my group is out for the count. I can't believe Issei could be this brutal. Riaz said with slight horror. The curse always said wrath of a dragon, and I guess that's why. Valerie groaned. Out of nowhere the girls felt a powerful shockwave which told them that the fighting was further into the forest. Let's go, Riaz said nervously. Yeah, Ingvild shouted and the girls ran into the forest. They could see the torn up area and realized that whoever was fighting Issei was holding him off for now. After finding a clearing they noticed what was happening and the quick reality of the situation was clear. Issei was in his balance breaker with a radiant red energy coming from him. Kuoh was off to the side clearly injured and while Kuroka and LeFay were gone, Arthur was fighting with a gold-colored blade with a round pommel and a large grip that made it seem like a 2-handed sword. If Arthur's using Caliburn, this must be bad. Valerie said ominously. Yeah, it is, Biku said weakly. Valerie moved towards her friend and smiled. Just relax, Biku. We'll get you healed soon enough. Yeah, but things aren't looking good. The kid ran into LeFay and freaked out. Ria's two girls tried to calm him down, but failed, and before Keno could call Ria's, she was knocked out also. Arthur showed up and sent him over here. He just got me a little bit ago. Biku wheezed. Got it. Now let us take over. Balance breaker, Valerie roared, and the white armor of her balance breaker appeared before she flew over to the two combatants. Your timing couldn't be any better. Arthur smirked. Shut up and let us go, Valerie said through the gauntlet, and alongside Ria's and Ingvild charged Issei. You would stand in my way as well. The Pendragon must die. Issei said in a twisted voice that was a mix of his and Drake's. You know I can't do that, Issei, Valerie said calmly. Yeah, so stand down or this won't get ugly. Ria's added. I'd like to see you try, Issei said with a cruel voice that clearly held a smile behind the helmet. Try this. Ria shouted, blasting Issei with massive ball filled with her power of destruction. Nice try but not good enough. Issei smiled before deflecting the ball of energy right behind him to the shock of Valerie, who was attempting a sneak attack. What the fuck? Valerie cursed, having barely dodged the attack. Unfortunately for her, the dodge gave Issei an opening. Using his speed he got above. It's over, Valerie, Issei said coldly before slamming his fist into her back. GWAHH, Valerie yelled in pain. Valerie, Ria said nervously, trying to fire an attack. Issei quickly rose into the air and extended his hand. It's over, dragon shot, Issei shouted before the prone Valerie. No, Ingvild shouted, firing a water serpent of her own that blocked the powerful strike but didn't lessen the explosive force. Oh well. Issei smiled as the dust cleared and Valerie Lucifer was on the ground, knocked out as well. Her balance breaker faded. You bastard, Ria scowled as she looked at Issei with rage in her eyes. What are you going to do now, Rias? You can't beat me, Issei taunted. No, but we can, Ingvild shouted before focusing her power. Underneath the helmet, Issei's eyes widened since he knew what was coming. Oh no you don't, Issei shouted before charging Ingvild, hoping to interrupt her. Unfortunately it wasn't to be. Not today, Issei, Rias shouted, firing an attack his way that distracted Issei just enough. Damn it, the berserk, Issei cursed as Ingvild's sacred gear arrived. Ingvild stood ready, well aware of what she wanted to do. Focusing as much magic power as she could, she looked towards Issei and shouted, stop. Using as much power as she could. Her shout froze the berserk Issei in place. Did it work, Ria said nervously. She got her answer when the balance breaker was torn apart and Issei collapsed onto the ground. I'd say it did, Ingvild smiled before looking towards the carnage. It was amazing that one person could do that much damage, but more so that she was able to stop him so easily. Great job, Ingvild. Ria said happily. Thank you, Lady Rias, Ingvild smiled happily. The incident was resolved with relative ease, and it was a good moment for the two girls whose bond was growing by the day. As Issei sat in his room, he couldn't help but smile at the way things had played out. His punishment for his outburst may have forced him to stay in his room for a week outside of showers, but considering he could still train, he would live with it. He probably wasn't going to have sex during that time, but that was okay also since things went exactly as he wanted. Well, that worked out pretty well. Issei chuckled. The truth was that he was well aware of what was happening. The actual curse's power faded once LeFay left, but he kept up the illusion in order to test Valerie and the others. Well, particularly Ingvild, since they hadn't seen her sacred gear's power. Yes, and I get the feeling that the big winner might be the Gremory heiress. Drake smirked. Issei chuckled at the response since it was very true. Rias and Issei had an odd relationship, and the fact Ria's incredible body couldn't control him scared her. Ingvild would be useful in that regards, and also give her a powerhouse pawn that would even odds against the others, seeing as how Asia was fairly weak and Gasper was still afraid of his powers. Sure, Kaneko had improved, but she wasn't quite there yet. He had to calm himself since he could sense somebody coming. A quick knock on the door came, which was likely to see if he was occupied or otherwise. I'm all alone, Issei said calmly. The door opened and Ingvild walked in wearing the blue nightgown from before. The fact she brought some food was a surprise also, but then again he was stuck here for dinner. Are you okay? Ingvild said nervously. Yeah, I'm fine. You can leave that on the desk if you want. Issei smiled. Okay, Ingvild said calmly before putting the food down before turning back to Issei. Is something wrong? Issei said calmly. I thought you'd want to know, Rias asked me to join her as a pawn. Ingvild revealed. Issei smiled at the news since it was exactly what he expected. That's good for both of you. Rias needed a pawn and you needed a new family. Issei replied calmly as he got up to eat his food. Ingvild was certainly confused by Issei's nonchalance considering what happened. Everything she was thought should have her resent him at least a little bit, and that doesn't bother you, Ingvild wondered. Issei put down his food for a bit. Why wouldn't I? Unlike Valerie, I'm not a devil, and Rias is a good person. Naive in a few regards but good nonetheless. Ingvild was shocked by the response, but couldn't help but wonder more. So you're not worried? Ingvild said nervously. No, because if a situation ever happened where you'd actually need to control me, it means something went horribly wrong. Plus the fact you actually have to ask that question means you're not thinking about it, Issei replied calmly, which more or less was what happened today. Issei Ingvild said calmly. If that's all, I should really finish my food. Issei smiled. Of course, Ingvild replied calmly before leaving. Issei calmly finished his food, but just as he did, another knock on his door arrived. Come on in. I'm alone, Issei smiled, well aware of how common of an issue that was even with his current situation. This time Riaz walked in and she was wearing her favorite pink nightgown. Riaz stood by the door, so it was a business call instead of her latest attempt to charm him, not that it would ever work. I thought you should know, I made Ingvild my pawn earlier today. Riaz revealed. I know, she just told me. Issei said calmly. And you're okay with it, Riaz replied, slightly taken aback at his nonchalance. It was no secret that their relationship had been an odd one for a long time. Issei didn't trust Riaz, and while he did enjoy fucking her 2 nights, he had kept a good distance between them unless necessary, something she bitterly realized when he finally had sex with her, just to use the moment as a buffer. Why wouldn't I be? You have every right to do so. Issei said calmly. Issei, Riaz said solemnly, but she froze as he got up from his spot and walked over to her, closing the distance between them in a flash. Tell me, Riaz. Do you fear me? Issei smiled as he placed his right hand on her cheek. Riaz tried to reply, but the words simply wouldn't leave her mouth as Issei's hand slid down her face past her neck and settling on her breast. My situation with Le Fay is an exceptional one, but make no mistake, it is an outlier, and one I'm fairly sure won't happen again anytime soon. Issei smiled. But Valerie, Riaz started to say before Issei's grabbed her breasts, causing her to moan. Valerie is probably having a long talk with Le Fay on how to deal with the curse and how to ensure it doesn't happen again, but that isn't what matters right now. Issei smiled, taking his hand off her breasts and leaving Riaz in a daze. Issei, Riaz stammered, trying to say what she wanted to say, but finding the words impossible to do so. Riaz, listen to me. Ingvild has nobody else but us to rely on. You've made her a part of your family, and you need to embrace her the way you have the others. Your focus right now should be on helping her to grow and preparing for the battle with the Cows Brigade. As long as you do that, you'll be fine. Issei replied before shocking Riaz by pulling her into a warm hug. This is why they love him. Riaz thought to herself as Issei's body permeated a warmth that was like nothing she felt before. Sure, they had sex when he arrived, but that was mostly rough, which suited Riaz surprisingly well. This was different. This was him saying everything is alright. This was him saying it'll all be okay. This was the warmth that he was certain his girls felt whenever they were with him. Alright, Riaz replied before placing her head on Issei's neck and simply enjoying his warmth. The pair stayed like that for another few minutes before Riaz pulled away. Leaving so soon? Issei teased. Yes, it wouldn't look good if I'm seen coming out of your room considering the big stink that I made about punishing you. Riaz pouted since she wanted to enjoy the moment. Alright, Issei replied before returning to his bed to relax. A reluctant Riaz left the room knowing that Issei didn't hate her and that it was time to focus on the upcoming meeting. It was late at night at the Gremory mansion when the door to Issei's room opened again. This time it was Valerie Lucifer and she was dressed in a pair of long-sleeved grey pajamas. Pretty simple by most standards, but Valerie wasn't the nightgown type. Walking towards the bed of her supposed rival, she smiled at the sleeping Issei, who was amusingly enough alone. You're a real ass, you know that, Issei. Valerie smiled as she looked over the sleeping dragon. She knew that Issei was faking it from the moment she noticed the lack of major injuries on the group, and she realized that it was a ploy by Issei and Azazel to push Riaz towards asking Ingvild to become her pawn. Issei could only smile at the response before he leaned up in his bed. So Valerie makes 3. Issei deadpanned his face to Lucifer heiress. Valerie simply smiled and sat on the edge of the bed facing Issei. You don't seem surprised by my appearance, Valerie smiled. Considering how quickly you played dead, I knew you'd come see me sooner or later. I assume you'd want to talk about why we arranged that whole mess. Issei smiled. Valerie frowned since it confirmed what she suspected. It was a plot by you and Zaz to get Riaz to add Ingvild to her peerage, even though it would make far more sense for you to take her as one of yours like Irina and Zenobia. It would make more sense for me, but we need Ingvild with Riaz to give her the extra firepower for when Diodora attacks. Valerie frowned, remembering the conversation. In other words, give Ingvild to Riaz. She has power needed to stop Diodora's plotting, since a Keno ain't enough if things go pear-shaped. Kaneko is growing, but she's gonna need some time before she can be a real powerhouse. Gasper's getting stronger, but his power is a known commodity and one they should be able to manage. The nun is useless and Yumi and Carloman are strong, but again not the trump card Riaz needs. Precisely. Plus it lets me stay out of it unless absolutely necessary. Issei smiled. Valerie couldn't help but smile at the concept since it was very much Issei. You protect your family by avoiding conflict. I protect mine by becoming incredibly powerful. Of course that didn't stop you from having Zaz make those necklaces. Valerie smirked, recalling the day she heard about those. I got lucky that the Cow's Brigade Dick only wanted to fight me and Genevieve was able to control that guy. Had somebody truly annoying got a hold of them it could have been different. I wasn't going to let that happen again, Issei admitted. Valerie couldn't help but laugh since it was very true. By the way, what are you going to do when you return to Kuoh? Valerie mused. Same as I've been doing. Spend most of my time with the kendo club having plenty of sex and see you guys when needed. Issei shrugged. It went without saying that he'd be sleeping with Yumi and Carloman also. Valerie smiled before reaching for her pajama top and flinging it off her body, revealing that she wasn't wearing a bra, so her breasts were on full display, along with pink nipples that were just begging to be sucked. You realize that if you wanted to spend your time having sex, you have Ria's Yumi, Carloman, Irina, Zenobia, Mia, Keno and Ingvild already. Valerie smiled. The Keno and Ingvild. Issei said with a raised eyebrow, focusing on that instead of on Valerie's body. Oh come on. We both know you could fuck Ingvild right now if you really wanted. A Keno wouldn't take much to convince either. Valerie teased as she pulled her pants down, revealing just a silver pair of panties. True, but I can't get too greedy. Riaz is already terrified I'll take Yumi and Carloman from her, and considering how I treat her if I pursue a Keno it'll get worse. Issei smirked. Of course Yumi already voiced her opinion on the subject just to be turned down, and Carloman was curious about where she stood with his growing harem before he reassured them. The smiling Valerie crawled onto the bed with her breast swaying as she moved over the covers right towards Issei, herself a few inches from Issei's face with her naked body there for Issei to enjoy if he just made a simple move forward. Speaking of taking people, it wouldn't take much for you to take me right now, would it, Issei? Valerie said in a surprisingly seductive voice. We both know that if you actually intended to have sex with me tonight it would have already happened and we'd talk afterwards. Issei smiled despite the tantalizing sight in front of him. Rather ironically, taking her virginity would have been a reward given what he did. You suck sometimes, you know that. Valerie pouted before getting off the bed and walking back to her clothes. She was hoping to tease Issei, but he was far too level-headed to fall for that. Yeah, but I'm doing both of us a favor. Right now, you have a lot to think about and me sleeping with you won't help. Issei smirked. Good night, Issei. Valerie pouted before leaving the room with a huff of annoyance. He was right about that, and if she was going to return she needed to be focused. Once Valerie was gone, Issei couldn't hide the smile that formed on his face. Once again had the devil girls right where he wanted them, that was a waste partner. She was there for the taking. Drake grumbled. True, but considering the way things played out I still win. Issei smiled. How's that? Drake wondered. I was able to confirm how the three heiresses feel about me, even if two of the three were pretty much a given. Riaz fears my power, but also hates that she is denied my warmth the way her servants are. Ingvild sees the way I am with the others, but she's worried that her power will mess up any relationship we have. Valerie is just like Riaz, but her issue is LaFay. Issei smiled. Very well, but be careful. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Drake warned. I'm aware. Issei smiled as he nodded off to bed. He could use some rest after using so much power against the others. Hopefully things were going well with the kendo girls. Kuoh. The girls of the kendo club were not happy at all as they made their way to the location of the summer kendo tournament. I can't believe we're going with you too instead of Issei, Clarissa teased as the girls sat in the bus heading to Nachizuri. Each of the 10 members of the kendo club tried to summon Issei to their side while being naked, and each one of them failed. Almost as though to spite them further, Issei sent Irina and Zenobia to check in on them a few days ago, and they had been watching their training instead. Learning that the reason for their attempts was to lessen the blow of a summer kendo tournament where they'd be reunited with Genevieve made Irina and Zenobia up the training even more out of annoyance. You only have yourselves to blame. Issei literally had one rule for you girls with those necklaces, and it was no booty calls. The fact that you girls couldn't make it a few days without asking for a booty call was ridiculous. Irina deadpanned. As you already know, we did it because we wanted to tell him about this and figured sex would lighten his mood. Caddis reminded her. You'd have been wrong, but that doesn't matter now. Irina replied, remembering her own reaction to the news and the annoyance she felt. She was pretty sure whoever told Issei about the tournament would have probably been unable to walk the next day, especially since they knew about the supernatural now. Her body actually shuddered at the thought. Well, you're here now and we have to deal with it. Murayama frowned. The rest of the trip was silent as the girls prepared to see Genevieve for the first time since their kidnapping. As they made their way towards the bus after the first day of the tournament, the girls of Kuoh were extremely happy with the results. Murayama, Caddis and Clarissa made it to the round of 16 for the individual tournament, and they managed to place into the quarterfinals also. As the girls got dressed, there was a sense of pride that occurred because they won on their terms and without Issei to guide them. Wait. A voice they all knew very well called out, causing them to pause. It was Genevieve Arcana dressed in the girl's uniform of Nachizuri. The girls stopped out of sheer curiosity, but it was clear from the cold glances she received Genevieve was not well liked by the Kuoh girls. You really do have a death wish, don't you, Genevieve? Irina smiled with a viciousness that Genevieve flinched badly, well aware of her screw-up, but she kept her cool. Hear what I have to say at least. Genevieve said calmly, hoping that Irina would be reasonable compared to Issei. Fine, but if you came just to apologize, you'll forfeit your life right now. Any of us can call Issei, and that would end badly for you, I'm sure. Irina said coldly as the girls revealed their necklaces. Genevieve flinched since she'd be screwed if the girls called Issei. Well, for the record, I am sorry. I did my best to ensure that no harm came to you guys, but that's not why I'm here. I came to warn Issei about somebody that he'll likely be interacting with soon. Oh, and who's that? Zenobia said with restrained rage. His name is Diodora Asterith. All I can tell you is that the guy is trouble. Genevieve explained. Honestly, it would have been easier to tell Issei, but Genevieve was pretty sure he might kill her. I'll let Issei know. Now if you don't mind, we're heading back. Irina said calmly. Since Issei already knew about Diodora, there was no reason to tell him about the meeting. Fine, Genevieve said calmly as the kendo club departed. She did her part and the rest would be determined in due time. End of the here. So that's it for today's video, guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.